Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics. So our tax system needs a fundamental rethink. And that's not just my view. That is the view of an experienced tax lawyer that I've been talking to.
Yeah, I mean, that time is coming very soon. But let's say AI, because it might be that very soon you'll have your own avatar, Phil. And that there's no reason for that avatar to sit in the UK. It can sit in Dubai or in Cyprus.
In this video, I'm talking to a tax lawyer whom I discussed a while ago because of his legal case against another tax lawyer, Dan Neidle. Setu Kamal is going to explain where Neidle may have gone wrong, made a mistake, but also we discussed the difference in tax law in the EU post-Brexit Britain, how these systems should be made simpler in the interests of both fairness and to make it easier to enforce tax laws, and discuss the balance between the difficulty in getting very wealthy people to pay their fair share of tax and the grievance felt by many people at the idea of very wealthy people escaping tax responsibilities that most of us have no option but to accept. But first, for daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel to stay notified. So the first thing to be clear on, as we're going to be discussing tax avoidance and tax evasion, is to explain what the difference is. Both of them take the form of arranging your finances specifically to reduce your tax liabilities. In other words, they are both actions designed to allow you to pay less tax. However, some methods of doing so are legal, such as paying into a pension or a trust fund. Some are illegal, such as just not reporting your income properly. Tax avoidance is the legal way to reduce your taxes. Tax evasion is when it's illegal. But there are times when a legal scheme doesn't benefit society and can actually be harmful. And Setu and I disagreed on some of the fundamental rights and wrongs of tax affairs. But interesting that both of us agree that the tax system does not serve either individuals or society in its current form. It's too complex. It doesn't do its job of maintaining the economy. Surely there's a point at which you can afford some people to leave in order that the overall tax revenue goes to go. And again, remember, all I'm arguing for is not higher rates of tax, but better enforcement. So avoiding letting people arrange things in a way that is purely to reduce their tax liabilities. Because there are cases, yes, I mean, you can set up a trust if that benefits your employees, and that genuinely does. You can pay into a pension, and that's a benefit as well. But there are some schemes, surely, where people are just getting richer and not doing anything with the money either. It's not like they're doing anything with the money.
Yeah, I mean, to be frank, that kind of touches on what the definition of tax avoidance is,
Yeah.
Because I think one of the tests you apply is, are you doing it to dodge tax?
Yes.
And but that's one of the tests which the legislation sometimes applies as well. But the traditional definition of tax avoidance is when you get the economic benefit of something, but you don't pay the tax on it. So if I receive a loan,
Yeah.
but it's really mine, then I should pay tax on it, which
Yeah.
is fair. But under that traditional definition, well, no one is asking what the objective is, and I wonder whether we should. Why should something become wrong just because you do it for a purpose? If there's genuine economic rationale behind it, then it should be deductible, for instance.
So would you say, probably as a last point, would you say then that really what should happen is the government in the UK, maybe other countries as well, should have a fundamental rethink about the purpose of tax and almost rebuild the system to make sure that it's understandable by everyone and that it does what it needs to do, which is to recycle money in the economy?
Yeah, I mean, that time is coming very soon. Now, just by the way, you said you're going to wrap up soon. But let's say AI, because it might be that very soon you'll have your own avatar, Phil, will do all the work. And there's no
No.
reason for that avatar to, okay, fine. The stuff you do cannot be replicated easily, but a lot of people will. And that there's no reason for that avatar to sit in the UK. It can sit in Dubai or in Cyprus. And that's going to be a seismic change to the landscape. And you can't object to the fact that, well, someone's doing the work for me. Why should I pay tax? So all these things are around the corner, I believe.
So a while ago, I discussed a case between Setu Kamal and Dan Neidle. Neidle campaigns against dodgy tax arrangements and also just bad tax laws. He's had success in spotlighting people involved in dodgy tax affairs, most famously the former Chancellor Nadeem Zahawi. But he'd also highlighted Setu, who thinks Neidle made a mistake in not only associating with a company that he really had an issue with, purely because he's done some work for them, but doesn't control the company. But also the scheme itself may not be doing anything wrong, as Setu points out, because Neidle is assuming that the clients are UK based and therefore subject to UK law, when actually they're mostly EU based and therefore going by EU law, which is different. So the issue is mostly, is it that he's named you in relation to a company and you're not responsible for that company, but also that not necessarily the scheme he's pointing at is illegal?
Yeah, I have no objection to being associated with that company. It's something I helped found, and I'm proud of it. It's actually an Estonian company, and it's focusing, or my intention is for it to focus on Europe, because we have all this know-how of EU laws, and so it would be a waste for it to go not to be applied in the European Union. So that's really what the purpose of it is. Why Dan Neidle feels like it's of his, he's kind of assumed that all the clients are in the UK, which is a wrong thing to assume. And even his analysis on EU laws is kind of not incorrect, because he kind of highlights specific Italian laws, German laws, and so on. But the fact is that EU law is supreme, and the right to the free movement of capital is supreme.
So where he may have made a mistake is, first of all, naming you when some of the clients he's talking about were not necessarily your clients, but also the fact he's not taking into account the law as it exists in the EU. Is that the issue?
Yeah. No, I think, by the way, so I'm getting sidetracked because there's so much to say, right?
Sure, yeah.
But so maybe it's my mistake. But I think the main mistake is that he has used in the slug failed tax avoidance from Setu Kamal. And there is no case in which any planning, which I have advised on, has failed. And then it gets worse, because he kind of attributes a specific scheme to me, which he himself says is hopeless. And so that's the defamation right there. Now, what I would say, a lot in law depends on how you frame the argument, because if someone says 10 things about me,
Yeah.
and he can say, well, 8 of them are in the public interest, fine. It may well be. He can highlight the cases I've lost. And he can also state his opinion. But to make a statement of facts, that's all I needed, that one slug. And then 1 or 2 other comments. Like he says, the court held that I breached my duties to the court, which is incorrect. So I have 1 or 2 statements. And then the way I then design the argument is all the other points go towards malice. And in a case of malicious defamation, there's a case for aggravated damages.
Yeah.
So that's really how I.
So I mean, you're clear that, I mean, in terms of your work, presumably it's 2 main types of client. You've got some clients who come to you to make sure that they're complying with the law, and your clients, as you said, a lot of them are based in the EU because of your EU knowledge. So it's got nothing to do with British law. And I suppose in some other cases, and this is what we're going to come to next, because it was really quite interesting about how it relates into Britain with the loan charge, you may get someone who feels that they were complying with the law, HMRC chase. Do you have any clients, or have you had any clients where HMRC have pursued someone and they've needed your services to defend them?
Yes, a lot of cases.
Yeah. So I mean, so that's what I would expect of a tax lawyer there. So that's the sort of type of work you do. So in terms of what Dan Neidle was saying, he was confusing potentially British law or taxes that would be due in Britain that are actually not at all. They're based in the EU.
Yeah. A lot of the clients are in the EU,
Yeah.
and of course I have UK clients as well, and of course I do provide schemes to them, and I'm proud of the work I do. There's all sorts of things you can do legitimately.
Now, Setu's prepared some details of where he thinks Neidle has made errors on his LinkedIn page, which I'll link in the description below. So then we discuss the practical and moral aspects of paying tax. See, when people see the tax system stacked against them, as many ordinary members of the public do now, because it is badly stacked against them, there's a risk that they vote for the MAGA-like snake oil salesman, as they did in America, and that hurts everyone. Plenty of rich people in America not enjoying a MAGA government, and I would say, well, if only they'd paid their taxes properly in the past, it wouldn't have been needed.
So, I mean, for instance, let's say, like, this is an idea I came up with recently. Let's say you have £1 million and you want to invest from it. But if you invest in the UK, every time you withdraw from eToro, you pay tax, capital gains tax. So what you could do is contribute it to a trust, and there'll be a tax charge going in. The first 325,000 is tax free, but the rest of it you'll pay 20%. But the beauty then is it's not in your estate for IST purposes. And if the trust is in Cyprus, it can invest, without, it can grow.
Yeah.
And so the question is that abusive or not? I don't know, because it's like you're paying the tax. But you know what I mean?
Because this is where there's a difference between an issue of law. An issue of law is if it's either illegal or it's not, and ultimately, if it's tested in court, a judge will decide whether it is legal or not. But in terms of what you're suggesting there, is something right? Is it a good way to tax? I think one issue that a lot of people will have in Britain right now, so it may well have been in other countries as well, so we have a cost of living crisis. We have a situation where the economy is flat. The cost of borrowing is now much greater. We had over a decade of very low cost of borrowing. Now it's very high. We've had not very much investment for a long time. So everyone wants the government to invest. But tax rates are also historically high for Britain. They're sometimes higher elsewhere and sometimes lower, but they're historically high for Britain. And then you've got a situation where you have, for example, when Rishi Sunak released as Prime Minister, he released the details summary of his tax returns. And he was paying a lower rate of tax than, say, a nurse would in terms of his income. All perfectly legal. But a lot of people will look at that as not particularly fair. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, but do we know that to be the case? Because there were so many comments made about him, like he's the richest man, but it was his wife who's rich, as far as I can see.
I think he is personally the richest MP we've ever had, because his wife is worth twice as much as he is, but he alone at the time was worth at least £250 million.
Right. So I don't know. I mean, what his income was,
His income. So I can't remember offhand. I'll stick a thing up when we're recording. But it was on that particular year, it was several £1,000,000. Now the reason why it was so low, because a lot of it was capital gains, and capital gains capital gains are taxed at a significantly lower rate than income tax. And I say it was all perfectly legal. There was no issue with it. No one was making issue with it. It was just a case of, if someone is making several £1,000,000, for them, the cost of a tin of beans is the same as anyone else. The cost of electricity, they may have a bigger house, they may spend more on electricity, but the per unit cost of electricity is the same. Everything costs the same, and they have much more income. So they actually can afford to be taxed at the same rate as everyone else. And yet many people are taxed at a lower rate, even though they're earning more. And the cumulative effect, there's two sides of it. First of all, there's a perceived unfairness. And I think actually I would say it's an unfairness. But the second side of it is just practical. The country would like much more in terms of tax revenues to be able to invest, particularly as there's now a higher cost of repaying debt, and which is only going to go up at the moment. What have we got? We've got, Trump's tariff shenanigans. We've now got the war in Iran, which could significantly increase the cost of oil and other commodities that we need to trade. So we've got all these pressures on the country's finances, and people who are earning a lot of money are not really doing a lot with that money, are paying a lower rate of tax. And I think a lot of people, and my issue with that is it breeds a sense of unfairness in people's minds, and it therefore makes people more likely to vote for, people who offer the easy answers. We've seen this in America with the adoption of Trump. I would say that's not working out well for America. And that's a danger, because why did Trump come to power in the first place in 2016? Well, 2017 became president. He promised to drain the swamp. He was saying that the Democrats and Republicans were both failing people. People recognized that they were getting a raw deal. He promised to change it all. He didn't, but he promised to. And we have the same problem in Britain with Reform UK. They are doing the same thing. They're saying that Conservatives and Labour are both failing people, and people are looking at the situation and going, well, yeah, because we don't know why you're not taxing the rich more.
Yeah, I see the point you're making, but I mean, isn't your argument coming from a place of entitlement? Because you're saying we need the money, and so you have to provide it somehow. You know what I mean? Is there not an argument that, well, the person doesn't have to be in the country in the first place?
Yeah, so you're talking about people who could just leave the country to reduce their tax liabilities.
Yes.
Well, that's another practical problem. So there's two arguments I have. One is an issue of fairness, which could end up leading people to vote for, the easy answers. The other one is a practical answer. We need the money. And yes, people can leave. And that's another practical problem. And one of the reasons why I try, when people say, well, just tax the rich more, why I sort of argue, well, although sometimes people overblow the extent to which people will leave a country if they're taxed more, nonetheless, there is a point at which people do that. But my argument is more, instead of raising rates of tax, which hits the people who pay tax properly, why not increase the enforcement of existing tax rates better? And that's where sometimes what is a perfectly legal tax avoidance scheme, you look at it and you think, but should it be? Is it fair?
Yeah, I mean, so 2 points. There's a macroeconomic point and points about, schemes in particular. But the macroeconomic point, I'd say, is the Laffer curve, So let's make the country so attractive that people flock to it. For some reason, we don't like people flocking to the UK, but it would be nice if we could have that, And so it's a balance, is it not? Is it not? Like, you can't be like tax 100% or zero. So it has to be in the middle.
Absolutely not. It has to be somewhere in the middle. The problem with using the Laffer curve is, first of all, someone just randomly drew it on a net. Well, Laffer just drew it on a napkin, and secondly, people have used it to then claim figures that have got no mathematical basis, haven't they? But there is a point at which, if you tax too much, people will just go somewhere else. And of course, the richer people are the ones who are most able to do that. And there is a point at which it's too low. But at the moment, the issue is that there are some people for which it's too low. But there are some people, like, you can have two people both earning £10 million a year and paying different rates of tax. That's why I personally am not in favour of raising the rate of tax. I am in favour of making sure both of those two people pay the same. So there we are. Tax is something I've talked about a lot over the past few years, and will do again quite regularly, I feel, because I think it's causing friction with our politics. At the end of the day, a lot of the friction is caused by a perception of equitability in society. But interesting to discuss this battle we have between the rights of individuals and the needs of society. Ideally, we'd have a tax system where this conflict doesn't exist. So we should build one where that's the case. But let me know what you think in the comments below. And for more content, you can subscribe to the channel or even join for access to streams and behind the scenes updates. Thanks for watching. And until next time, I'll see you later.